Hello, my name is Alan Foom. Today is the 23rd of August 2020, and I'm going to talk about an update to the oil and gas situation in the USA, looking at rig counts and storage. I posted a document on LinkedIn in May, which looked at where the situation was then, and this is an update of what has happened since then. So since May, rig counts look to have hit an abyssal plane. They seem to have stabilized at a much lower level than they were, which I'll talk about in a minute. Storage volumes also appear to have hit a plateau. US oil production appears to have flattened, although this may change later, and WTI prices also appear to be steady at around $40 a barrel, so crude prices also appear to have stabilized. So let's look at US crude production in the last 2 years. So during 2019, which is the blue line, we appear to have had a steady increase as more wells have been drilled. There was a little dip in the middle of August due to the hurricane season and interruptions in production since then. So we continue, and by the beginning of 2020, we're producing just under 13 million barrels of oil a day in America. In March, the lockdown started, and oil production declined as wells were shut in, fewer new wells were drilled, and has now declined to about 11 million barrels of oil per day, with a few local interruptions. Now, as oil prices have stabilized, some companies are talking about increasing production again, restarting wells. So let's look at storage. And before I do that, I need to explain about pad districts. Now, the US Petroleum Administration during World War II established districts within the United States for controlling the petroleum supply. These districts were since abolished, but they were used as a statistical measure by the US government, particularly the Energy Information Administration. And the two main districts that we're looking at are the Southern District, PAD 3, which is the Gulf Coast, which has 56% of the US oil storage capacity, and then District 2, which is the Midwest, the Red District, which has about 25% of the US oil storage capacity. And the main part here is the town of Cushing, Oklahoma, which is the hub of the US petroleum industry downstream, which is where all the pipelines are. They have a sign saying Cushing, pipeline headquarters of the world. And Cushing is important because it is the delivery point for WTI or West Texas Intermediate crude. So any contract in WTI has to be physically delivered to Cushing, which caused a bit of a problem in late April, early May, when there was not enough storage capacity. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. So looking at overall commercial stocks, excluding the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, we are currently at relatively record levels, although we still have got a bit of safety margin regarding the total available storage capacity. So what had happened was we were moving along at a relatively high level, a bit above average, but still within the normal range. Then the lockdown started, and production continued, but demand fell off a cliff temporarily, and stocks built up. Eventually, production caught up with the lack of demand, or slowed down, and then we had a plateau, which continued until the last few weeks, and we're now beginning to see drawdowns. So we're moving towards the previous maximum. Obviously, we do not know what will happen next. Looking at Cushing, or crushing at Cushing. Now, Cushing is the main delivery point for WTI. So again, stocks at Cushing were a little bit, sort of about average, a little bit below average, until the start of lockdown, and they shot up very rapidly as production continued, but local demand dropped off a cliff. So stocks built up. Eventually they came very close to filling up completely. Indeed, the flash crash happened because the people who had physical contracts for the oil had nowhere to store it. Eventually this was solved by moving oil out of Cushing towards towards other places, and you had a situation where you were moving towards roughly average in terms of oil stocks, although it's been creeping up a little bit since then. So what will happen next, again, we do not know. But the lesson has been learned that capacity at Cushing needs to be maintained for the WTI, the West Texas Intermediate contract, to function effectively. Looking at PAD 3, which is the Gulf Coast of America, you had a much steadier increase, a plateau, and then a decline. So this is the main heart of the US oil industry, which contains over half the storage capacity and majority of the refineries. Now looking at Strategic Petroleum Reserve, this is a reserve maintained by the US government to ensure that there's a buffer in case there's another oil shock. And levels accrued within SPR have been at record lows. So this is the maximum, this is the average, this is the low, and the sky blue line, thick sky blue line, is where you are. There's been a bit of a build-up lately. Now there's some speculation that hydrocarbons have been moved out of Cushing into the SPR to make room. I don't know if that's true, but there's some speculation about that. But we're still relatively close to minimum levels, so if the US government wished to boost their Strategic Petroleum Reserve, now might not be a bad time to do so. Looking at the oil rig count, now this is produced by a company called Baker Hughes on a weekly basis, comes out on a Friday. And this is a count of rigs that are working within the United States. They also do a global count. So within this graph, these are the three main shale basins. You've got the Eagle Ford, Texas Gulf Coast, the Bakken in North Dakota, and the Permian, which is in West Texas and eastern New Mexico, which is by far the bulk of the drilling and is really the super basin of the United States. Also has significant increases in production. The other lines are the Niobrara and in Colorado, and the Woodford Scoop Stack, which is in Oklahoma, and then the Soldado Basin. So what you see is moving along the shelf, roughly about just under 700 rigs active, drilling tight oil wells. And then the crash, you had a very rapid slope and moving towards the Abyssal Plain. And the last week you've had a tick up of 10 rigs in the Permian. So are we coming towards a mid-ocean ridge? Or maybe there's a possibility of the conjugate margin. Sorry, inner geologist coming out, can't resist it. And this dark blue line is the oil price, West Texas Intermediate. So you can see coming along, decline with COVID restrictions, fall to near zero, well, actual zero in terms of futures contracts, and then steady re-increase as storage has been sorted out, and then relatively flat at around $40 a barrel since then. In terms of what this has meant to oil rigs, so this is a change in the rig count. So that's the shelf, this is the slope, and this is the Abyssal Plain. In terms of actual numbers, this has been a very difficult situation for the United States. 25% fall in overall rig counts, 12% in the Eagle Ford, 19% in the Bakken, 20% of in the Permian. These are the rigs that are left after the fall. A very difficult and challenging time for many people in the oil patch in the United States. These are the well completions. So this is from the EIA monthly drilling productivity report. This is the number of wells that are actually put on production. An oil well is initially drilled by a rig, then the rig moves off and a completion crew comes in to do the frac and install the production tubing, install the wellhead, and then hook the well up to the production system. So these are the wells that are actually coming onto production. And you had just under 1,000 wells steady at the beginning of the year, and now it has fallen to less than 200. This shows the situation that we're in. Now what that will mean long term is that production to the United States will decline, because in terms of light tight oil, you have to keep drilling to grow. You have to be drilling very heavily to grow. Running like Mo Farah to stand still, running like Usain Bolt to grow. At the moment, we are moving very, very slowly. In terms of potential oil demand, EIA issue a short-term outlook, and this is the August figure. So we had a fall from just over 20 to about 15 in the early part of 2020. They're forecasting moving to about 90 in the latter part of 2020 and possibly getting to roughly where we were by late 2021. Obviously, a very challenging situation, but a difficult one to predict because we do not know what future restrictions may bring in terms of the effects of COVID. Looking at the futures price curve, so this is price for WTI delivery at dates from September 2020 out to June 2031, so next 10 odd years. 8th of May, September delivery was about 27. 6th of August, September delivery was about 41. So curve is moving up in terms of medium-term growth. So just a summary in terms of what's been happening between May and August. Production has declined significantly but looks like it leveled off. WTI price, as above, declined significantly but leveled off. Same with the rig count. The US light tight oil companies are hurting, as is the service sector. Some companies have gone bankrupt, some companies are in Chapter 11. A lot of pain, unfortunately, for a lot of people. And can they manage a recovery? Are there the people? Is there the capital? Is there the belief that there is a positive future? Crude and product stock levels have hit plateau, now above decade highs. Quite what's going to happen in the future, there appears to be a bit of a drawdown. We don't know. And the Cushing, Oklahoma levels have decreased from the emergency levels in May, and the industry will make sure that that doesn't happen again. But what we don't know is what will happen next. So, something to be looking forward to, wherever that comes.